The categories will be story, gameplay, and open world. Obviously, not all of these are of equal importance to a game, so feel free to take the winner of the gameplay category as the overall winner. And since this channel's selling point is a time-saving game analysis, let's examine that all-important category. Gameplay in Rise of the Ronin is the strongest aspect of the game. Now, I haven't played Sekiro or Nioh, so I'm afraid I can't make too many comparisons, and I might unfairly award points for concepts I don't recognize as unoriginal, but I have never been so overwhelmed in a good way by combat. Rise of the Ronin is just so angry. The hot orange sparks that fly off the blades are reminiscent of a furious battle in hell, and the intensity and feedback you get from your controller makes it obvious why this game is a console exclusive. While the mission structure is formulaic, with every mission culminating in a bloody boss battle, there's not a bad one in the whole game. However, due to the formula, there's not really one that stands out either. On the other hand, Ghost of Tsushima is the best combat in any open world game ever, as long as we only count true exploration-focused open worlds and discount games like God of War and Arkham Asylum. What sets Ghost of Tsushima apart from every other sword-fighting game is the rhythm of combat, which perfectly encapsulates how samurai would do battle, just as George Lucas did in The Empire Strikes Back. The dance you do with the Mongols forms a pattern in your mind, until you're subconsciously deflecting blows and slicing off appendages. It's simply the most engrossing and gorgeous non-scripted battles I've ever seen. Where Rise of the Ronin is thrash metal, Ghost of Tsushima is a concerto, where the rhythm of battle flows smoothly as your blade is sharp. It's that exact design philosophy that made Hi-Fi Rush my game of the year in 2023, and since the only reason you'd be watching this video is if you own a PS5, go and buy that game immediately. Moving on to the open world, before we get into this category, you have to understand that I don't care even slightly about graphics and presentation. Gameplay and story are the only things that matter, one a lot more than the other. So I'm not really wooed by Ghost of Tsushima's realism or animations, and I find the world to be a checklist open world like any other game, hidden beneath gorgeous presentation. And that's not a bad thing. I enjoy filling out checklist open worlds as long as the act of doing them is fun. Since Rise of the Ronin shares this style of icon-heavy map open world, in my eyes the two are identical, and you can just defer back to the gameplay category to see who the winner is. Next up is story, and this is where I'm going to draw some ire, as I'm not particularly fond of Ghost of Tsushima's main story. Jin Sakai is a wonderful protagonist, and the core of the story holding it all together, but the moral dilemma of Ghost of Tsushima isn't as hard as the game thinks it is, and the answer is obvious to anyone with critical thinking skills. Should we abandon our traditions and win, or should we stubbornly get our entire people slaughtered for a reason as convincing as a certain echidna declaring that this is the way? I just can't deal with how cartoonish everyone acts about the morality of doing what's right versus winning. Now, there is absolutely exciting discussions to be had about this subject, about not sinking to the lows of your enemies to claim victory, but that argument's only believable when an entire country isn't at stake. Ghost of Tsushima does a poor job of conveying both sides of the argument by dehumanizing the Mongols as much as possible, making sure that no player can ever feel a hint of sympathy towards them. Now, you may argue that the game isn't trying to make you choose, and is telling you the answer, but then it makes you decide the direction of your moral compass at the end, so it is trying to get you to think about whether tradition should be honoured. Meanwhile, Rise of the Ronin is a more exciting story, told infinitely worse. The end of the shogunate is a much more fascinating setting for a story, with a chance to have much more polarizing and complex themes. However, Rise of the Ronin overcomplicates itself and delivers a jumbled mess of a story with way too many characters to keep track of. This is due to the game's companion system, which means that every story mission must introduce some kind of new ally for the player, but maybe you just needed to put more of them out in the open world, because I'm totally lost when it comes to figuring out who's who. The sheer frequency with which characters are introduced piles up on top of the story until it's buried beneath an army of black-haired samurai whose differences are negligible, and the meaning of the story becomes incomprehensible. I eventually just had to turn my brain off and power through the campaign based on the sublime combat, because Rise of the Ronin's story, while more intriguing and complex than Ghost of Tsushima's, is presented amateurishly. While Ghost of Tsushima is still the better game, I believe that the animations and presentation help to hide some of its more obvious flaws from players. So to me, these games are a lot closer than quality than other people would dare to admit, and they both comfortably sit in 6 out of 10 range. If you want to hear a more in-depth opinion of Rise of the Ronin's open world, click the box on the left, and I'll see you in another 2 days.